So welcome everybody back to the FITSNews studio. Those of you who follow this news outlet know that we are very passionate about academic issues, about education issues. We're very passionate about parental choice, about getting parents more involved in the education of their children. We're also very passionate about exposing corruption, malfeasance, indoctrination, and other bad behavior on the part of school board officials and other leaders in our state, both at the local and the state level. We talk a lot about this subject because it matters. It's the future, literally, our children. It's where we go as a society, where we go as a culture. And that battle is being fought every day. And in too many cases, parents are entering that battle unarmed or unaware of what's happening in these schools to their children. A few weeks ago, I got a call from one of these parents. Her name's Steph Berquist, and she told me a story about what she went through as a parent in Lexington County, South Carolina. And some of the things that Steph said just resonated with me so much, I wanted to bring her into the studio so we could have a conversation not only about what she's been through, but what she's doing about it and what she can tell you as parents that you can do about it. Steph, I want to thank you for being here today. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, we talked a few weeks ago, and you shared a little bit with me about everything that you've gone through. But just give our readers kind of a quick recap of what led you to where you are today.
Sure. So I've told you, and I'll tell everybody, 2-3 years ago, I was not heavily involved in school legislation, school boards, state superintendent debates, legislation, those kinds of things. But when the world started, kind of spinning out of control, as I say, 2.5 years ago, you kind of start to think. And, when I started not having access to my kids in the school, I was not allowed to make decisions for them in regards to COVID regulations, medical decisions were taken away from me. You kind of take a step back and you think, okay, where's the line between government and family? And I felt like the government's hand was in my family. And I have a shirt, and we actually had a billboard that says, we do not co-parent with the government. And I mean on any level. That is from a local school district level all the way to the President of the United States. As long as I'm a functioning adult, they are my children to parent and guide and nurture the way that we see fit, not the government. So that's sort of what got me involved. I say the silver lining, if you will, of the COVID is, like I had told you, parents are awake, not woke. There is a difference. We have seen now the silver lining of COVID, what is going on in the schools, the indoctrination, the corruption, the removal of what I consider parental autonomy. And so, I decided we needed to start thinking about doing something about it. There were about 4 or 5 of us moms that sort of got together. I can't take credit for starting that group. Another mom did, but we started having lunch at a local, what I consider a like-minded restaurant in Lexington, and sort of talking about what's going on and what we can do. So there were only 4 of us. After speaking at a lot of town halls, meaning the town of Lexington, local school districts, we weren't really getting very far because there's not a lot of legislation or past precedent to protect us and our rights. And by us, I mean the parents. So one day, one of the girls in what I considered our small group at that point, we decided to take out a billboard. And it started out with one billboard. We split the funds and we collected funds. And it was directed, at the school district. And, it was always about parents making our own choice for our kids. I actually don't recall what the first billboard says. I apologize. That gave us our first sort of news coverage, local news coverage, and it spread like wildfire. That put us in contact with some parents in Lexington, Richland 5. They're just across the dam, very local to us, a neighboring district, but they did not know about our small group, and we did not know that there's a small group of parents over there also starting to become activists in what I call the parental movement of parental autonomy, really.
Parental rights. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So anyways, one thing led to another, and I'll spare you all the lengthy details, but we ended up gaining many, many, many parents all over South Carolina. This is not just a local district issue. This is all over the state, and to be quite honest, all over the nation. So our group of 5 grew to 10, grew to 20. At one point, we had over 5,000 members in our groups combined between Lexington and LR5 on our social media.
You've been shut down a few times, though, hadn't you?
That's correct. So unfortunately, we have been shut down, I believe, 3 times now.
You gotta stop telling the truth, Steph.
That's the problem with the truth. We love transparency, but the government at any level does not. And so again, we are always trying to recoup, but it's been a blessing because again, the way that I see it now, fast forward 2.5 years later, we were 4 or 5 moms lunching, as I call it, to now thousands of parents all across the state of South Carolina. I have a dad I talk to in Beaufort County. I have a mom I speak to in Charleston, a gentleman I speak to in Lawrence County. We're all very well connected, and we're all helping each other in this parental movement. So that's kind of how I got started, if that answers your question.
And I want to dive into some of the policies that you guys are addressing, that you're focused on. But first, I did want to point out, there's a quote that you gave me back when we spoke, and I think that this is very important because sometimes any parent that stands up for their student gets branded, they get put in a box.
Absolutely.
And one of the things you said that I thought was very relevant, you said, I'm not anti-mask, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, I'm against the government dictating these choices to me as a parent. That's my right. That's my privilege. Is that kind of what?
Absolutely. And that goes back to the sort of one-line phrase of, I do not co-parent with the government. They do not have the right, constitutionally, ethically, morally, or any other way, in my opinion, to sort of force those things on my family. And you're absolutely right. I am not anti-mask. I am not anti-vaccine. That's a common misconception of the people in our group and the people who are fighting for what we fight for. We are anti-mandate. We are pro-choice for us making the best choices for our families and ourselves, medically and otherwise. I was going to say something else, but I've lost my train of thought.
Well, it's like when anybody challenges the official narrative that, oh, you're QAnon, or you're what? It's sort of like just they tag us with these labels to try to delegitimize what are legitimate arguments. I mean,
Absolutely.
They can't attack the argument, ad hominem, attack the person. So on the policy front, you want to go deep first, or how do you want to start?
Well, what you got?
What's the issue that's most passionate for you? Is it bonds for the wind? That
I think is an interesting topic that I think will segue into the bigger picture. So sure, I'll touch on that. Again, I cannot take credit for starting this, so I don't want to take credit where credit's not due, but I have run with it, and I think that that's equally as important.
Well, it's a nationwide
Absolutely.
thing,
So
right?
there is a website called Bonds for the Win, BONDS,
Dylan will put
for
that.
the win.
Our director of special projects, Dylan, will put that up on the screen.
There is a woman, a couple of women that started this. And if I'm not mistaken, the original person is in Illinois or Ohio. I could be wrong. Anyways, essentially, some of these parents in other states have found legal statutes and legislation that states every superintendent and every school board needs to have some type of bond or insurance. Now, you're probably thinking the same thing I were. What the heck does this mean? Why do we not know about this? Nobody knew about this.
It's over their official positions. This isn't like a accident at the school that's covered. This is over their conduct as
their elected positions. Right. Correct. Now, each state is different. Some hold what is called a surety bond. Some hold a fidelity bond, and some are covered under a blanket insurance policy. Now, as you can imagine, as moms, right, or parents, we all have jobs and businesses and kids, and we are not, most of us, licensed attorneys. So we're diving into this head on, trying to learn about a very complicated topic very quickly and efficiently. So I've learned a lot about this. I consider myself fairly legal savvy. I won an honorary law degree after all of this, by the way.
And full disclosure, I just want to say, when Steph and I were talking on the phone, I think you quoted state regs, local ordinances, federal regs, and literally you knew them chapter and verse. So Correct. That's no joke.
It's a lot, but you do what you have to do for your family. So anyway, so Bonds for the Win. I called some of what I consider the key players in all throughout the state, actually on the state level. And I said, I can do this, y'all. I said, we can do this. And I said, whoever wants to do this for their districts, I think this is something worth looking into. And again, another mom brought this to my attention. So another mom in our group found this website. And once I watched the 30-minute video on Bonds for the Win, that's when I said, okay, I can do this, and this is big. Yeah. And it's big for a couple reasons. You don't need an attorney. It doesn't require massive funds up front. And each individual person can do it to their specific situations. So essentially what this process is, different for each state, you find or get a copy of the surety bond, fidelity bond, or insurance policy that covers your school board or the individual separately, the superintendent, depending on your state. You then have the right as a citizen and a parent to file a claim against their bond or insurance policy. Again,
literally alleging malfeasance.
Correct. Now, the process for this, as I've learned in South Carolina, I did receive a copy, just so that you're aware, for our local district, all of the insurance policies, their crime policy, and their general liability policy. I have copies of those policies, and I have read them. The process for this is, and this is everywhere, whether you're filing against a bond or insurance claim, is you need to first serve your board with a letter of intent. And you can do this over writing. Typically, they advise that you do it in a public setting.
So you're not sneaking up on them.
That's correct. Right. It's I'm letting you know my intent is to file a claim if you do not comply with what I'm asking, is essentially what this letter of intent is.
Basically getting them to follow their own rules in many cases. Okay.
Correct. Or not break local, state, or federal statutes, which they've all been doing, again, in my opinion. So I presented this letter of intent to our school district in February. It was, I believe, 6 pages. Well, I did get through it. It was in a public meeting. It's recorded on public minutes. Every member, including the superintendent, got a written copy. And there were 6 demands, ranging from everything from the superintendent stepping down from his position to parents having the final say and being the primary stakeholders in their children's education, including books, removing porn from our schools, which are in the schools. And there was, a multitude of things listed. Again, this was served to them, and I gave them 48 hours to comply, which, based off of all of the precedent in the Bonds for Win and the information that we had gathered, was a logical amount of time for them to comply with this.
Seems fair.
I did not expect them to comply, as they did not. And so after that, after the 48 hours, I filed 2 claims the following day, one with the carrier that carries the crime policy and one with their general liability policy. In the letter of intent, you must state all of the laws that you believe have been broken and be able to prove it, which I believe that I very clearly can. That's my opinion. In the court of law, things could be, interpreted differently. So there were many, many, many local Lexington 1 policies, state statutes for South Carolina, and federal statutes that I noted with very specific details, and I offered proof to show how these were being broken. I filed the claim on Friday, both claims, and by Monday I had a denial letter from one carrier. Actually, it was 4 pages long, stating they've done nothing wrong, blah, blah, blah.
Took them 4 pages to say that.
Correct. And the following day, I received 2 more denial letters from attorneys who represent the South Carolina School Board and the South Carolina School Board Insurance Trust, which holds the general liability policy.
So you got 3 no's.
That's correct. And the attorney letters, in my opinion, were quite aggressive. To me, they are a scare tactic. So the interesting part, the way that I can sort of stir this around to why legislation is so important. So now we're at a standstill. Here I am following the law. Attorneys have said, who represent the school board, nope, we did nothing wrong. So where do we stand? So I go back to state statute, right? That's what we are supposed to follow in South Carolina and every state. Where's the statutes?
Yeah.
So there's a policy. It is 38-59-20, if I'm not mistaken. And it is the policy that addresses how companies must handle insurance claims in South Carolina. So I said, all right, if they're not going to properly even review my claim or address the claim, let's start looking at state statute that shows that they're not giving it ample opportunity to be reviewed. That's where we're at a standstill, to be honest. And that's where I think it's so important to sort of pay attention right now with what's happening with the parental rights movement, state legislation, because there is nothing that protects the parents or the families, which is why parents feel so powerless. I am actively looking right now for not only an opinion from the Attorney General, but something regarding past precedent, or legislation that might support these things. But unfortunately, I don't think it's there. And when there's no past precedent set, you're at a standstill for where do we go? We have a disagreement, right? There is a parent who feels one way, and there is lawyers who feel another way. So that's sort of where we're at a standstill, and we're still working to determine where we are with that. But I'm not sure the legislation's there, to be honest.
Yeah. And in one of the instances that we talked about earlier, this isn't just splitting hairs. You talked about the fact that Lexington District 1 was implementing a mask policy with absolutely no written authorization. There was literally nothing they had passed that gave them that authority. And again, you weren't necessarily opposing the policy. You were just simply saying, look, you're not following the rules. If you're going to do it, at least vote on it, have parental input, that sort of thing. Is this?
That is true. And you can actually see this, I believe, on the minutes. And there's actually a YouTube video of this meeting. One of the most heightened meetings, I will say, was when many parents, we were fighting the mask mandates, right? There was no state law at this point. There was no county ordinance. There was no town ordinance. And when Lexington 1 has been implementing this for so long, and we were fighting for them to not re-implement a new policy, one of the board members actually turned her mic on and said, there is no policy. This has never been a policy. And if you watch the video, the entire room, including myself and my family, my children were there that day. My husband spoke. My son made a brief statement, which was very interesting. The entire room gasped.
Yeah.
Because for over a year, they had been forcing these suffocation devices on families and refusing access to a constitutional public education with no policy.
Yeah, they just admitted it.
Exactly, and it's on public record. So that was very interesting, to answer your question.
Yeah. You talked about statutes and laws and the importance of following not just the laws, but the process by which they're made. And I wanted to discuss a bigger issue related to that. We're looking at another year, Republican state lawmakers, again, Republicans, I use my baby quotes there, Republicans, have super majorities or near super majorities in both legislative chambers. They occupy the governor's office, the AG's office, the superintendent of education is ostensibly a Republican. And yet, the most important reform here that would actually give parents, not just choice in name, but choice in their wallets, parental choice, is non-existent in South Carolina. It's non-existent. We're on the verge of spending near $18,000 per kid per year in the government-run system when you count the bonds.
Correct.
And what are we getting for that investment? Declining outcomes, again, the indoctrination, and these, school boards playing fast and loose with their own rules. Talk to us a little bit about where you are on the issue of school choice, Steph, and do you see it as something that could maybe unlock the parental power moving forward?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked that. So I have a few comments. Personally, my kids have been in the public school. I did remove them from the public school last year. That was a choice that was right for our family. I do believe in school choice, true school choice, not school choice with government strings attached and those kinds of things. And here's why. Anybody who has multiple children, even myself, every child is different. You cannot have a uniform education, a uniform location, a uniform process for people who God made uniquely different. Right. It doesn't work. And again, the silver lining of the COVID is parents are now seeing this. They are seeing what their children are being taught. They're seeing what's happening. They're seeing the indoctrination. And that has been a blessing of this whole situation. So what do we do about it, right? That's the question. We now see this. What do we do about it? There are a few bills right now that are, up for discussion. There's the ESA bill.
And tell our...
Sure, I'll go over that. And the PACE bill. And I don't claim to be 100% educated on both of them, but the ESA bill originally was written, to me, very poorly. It does absolutely nothing. It provides no protection. There's an income cap of $54,000, so my family wouldn't qualify for that. Anybody who makes over $54,000 a year does not qualify for that.
The way inflation's going next week, that group will double.
Absolutely. I was looking at my notes. There's government ties to it. It's almost like, I made the analogy, it's like moving vegetables around your plate for your mom to think you ate more, right? All the vegetables are still there. You've just moved them around so that it appears as though you've eaten more vegetables.
Guilty of that, Bo.
Do you see what I'm saying? They've just created verbiage in an ESA that makes people feel better, but it's still the same.
Choice
same
in
vegetables.
name only.
Correct.
Right.
Now, the PACE bill, to me, was a much better option. It was true choice. There was no income cap. I was just checking my notes.
Yeah,
so
please.
it was, it was much better written. Now, the PACE bill has not really gone anywhere. The ESA bill is up for discussion. And again, I'm still learning all the laws and the processes, so I'm not very savvy on, all those statutes. But I am fearful that neither of them will pass. And here's why. There was a Democratic legislature that made an opinion to amend the verbiage, in the ESA bill to be the same verbiage as in the PACE bill, which for somebody like me or people who believe what I believe in for parental autonomy would be great.
Right.
My fear is that they have presented that amendment so that both bills will no longer pass. Nobody is going to approve the ESA bill with the PACE verbiage,
It's
in
like
my
a
opinion.
poison pill. In other
Absolutely.
words. Right. Okay.
So to answer your question, why is it so important? Everybody needs to make the best choice for their child. And now that we all see what's going on, we have to be able to choose. The thing that I want people to think about is, why are the school districts, why is SC for Ed, why is SC Department of Education using all of their monetary and muscle power to fight these bills? What are they so afraid of by removing children from their campuses? Why are they so afraid of giving choice? That also puts a very sour taste in parents' mouths. If you are that terrified of us removing our children, you must be doing something that you're not being transparent with us about. And it makes us think, really.
Yeah, what's
that answers your
the
question.
real motivation? That's right.
Absolutely.
Well, again, you're a perfect example, Steph, of a parent who was kind of going along, but then COVID happens and all of a sudden you start to see some of the methods that these districts employ to just impose their will on parents and on children. And you're a parent that stood up and said, no,
Correct.
enough. You're encouraging others through your advocacy. Let me ask you about this. Speaking about things parents can do, you mentioned before we came on the upcoming Superintendent of Education race and an event you wanted to tell us a little bit about.
Yes, and you mentioned something parents can do. Can I also mention a couple other things? I want to encourage people to not take things at surface value. Just because your local principal or your school district says, oh, this is our policy, ask the questions. I do it every week when my kids were in school. I still do it. That's fine. Show me the policy. Show me where this is. And a perfect example to this is when my kids were no longer in the public school. My son is... He is a pilot, very advanced for his age. He needs ROTC for his career. And the district fought me and said that he was not allowed. I provided the state statute that says that he is allowed, but it was not being followed. I ultimately had to reach out to some high-power friends of ours to get a federal document from Donald Trump's office that was 1,200 pages that I had to submit to the district to allow him to do this. My daughter is trying out for a high school cheerleading team right now. And just in these last few weeks, we have gotten a little bit of pushback because she may or may not be on campus for the high school this year. Again, I have provided state statutes, but every year, why do parents have to work so hard to present these documents? So what can parents do to answer your question? Don't take things at surface value. It's okay to ask the questions. It doesn't mean you have to be rude or condescending. Just ask the questions. If something doesn't seem right, or you feel like you have the right to make a decision that the school or school district is telling you you can't, ask the questions. Don't be afraid to be involved. To answer your question about the state superintendent debate, again, I think a few years ago, myself included, a lot of us were guilty of not being overly involved. Again, I understand we all have jobs and kids and families and lives. It's going to be very important in the next year or two how we vote for our local school boards and how we vote for the state superintendent, because we as parents who support parental autonomy now know how much power they have. They have a lot of power. So I encourage people to get educated on the state superintendent race, which I'm very involved in with also some local parents and a Moms for Liberty group. There are currently 7 candidates, if I'm not mistaken. We are having an event on Thursday, April 28th in Lexington. It is a state superintendent debate, which I was heavily involved in helping organize, again, with another local group and some local parents. Every candidate is invited, regardless of whether Democrat or Republican or what their beliefs are. Most of them have confirmed. I know that one has denied. But again, we want people to know that every candidate is invited so that there is an equal platform for parents to see transparency. Get educated on the state superintendent race. It will impact their kids, our kids. So I think that's something I would encourage parents to do. And also encourage them to get educated on their local school board elections. For us in Lexington 1, we have 3 seats coming up. While it's not a majority, 3 is a great number, and we have great candidates running for those seats, and I believe that we will take those seats, which will be a huge success for, again, what I consider us in the parental rights, parental autonomy movement.
Oh, absolutely, and hopefully you'll let us come to the
Yes,
the
please.
Debate covered if that'd be all right. We'd love to be there.
Absolutely.
Steph, just thank you so much.
Thank
you so much.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
Again, thank everyone for tuning into this interview. And I just want to point something out. There's a lot that we can do on news outlets like mine to push these issues, but ultimately you're looking at what's really going to get it done, which is parents like Steph, parents like you, having enough, standing up and demanding accountability and demanding that the districts follow their own rules, or at the very least engage in a real discussion about this. Because like you're saying, Steph, a lot of these districts, they're breaking their own rules and not even telling parents.
Absolutely.
But thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you.
And this is another reminder: get involved, folks. It's your kids, it's their future. Be involved.